My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 60 years old. And I will tell you something I never had the courage to share before. At this age, people expect me to tell stories of love, grandchildren, gardens, and peaceful mornings. But the truth is, my life has been anything but peaceful. Behind my smile, I've carried secrets heavy enough to crush a soul. And tonight, I cannot keep them buried anymore. For years, I heard whispers about my son, soft voices in the neighborhood, teachers who hesitated to speak openly, relatives who would go silent when I entered the room. They all claimed there was something different about him, something I, as his mother, refused to see. Because how could I? He was my child. The baby I rocked to sleep. The boy I defended from bullies. The young man I believed would carry my legacy. But the whispers never stopped. They grew louder, sharper, like knives cutting through my denial. Until one night, when I could no longer pretend, I decided to watch him, with my own eyes, and what I discovered shattered everything I thought I knew about love, motherhood, and family. So I ask you, are you ready to hear a truth that even a mother wishes she had never seen? I remember the first time I heard the whispers. I was standing by the bakery on Maple Street, waiting for my order, when two women behind me lowered their voices. One of them said, "That's her. That's Eleanor. You know, the one with the boy?" I turned around, and their eyes darted away, their lips sealing shut as if I had caught them stealing. I asked myself, what could they possibly mean? The boy, my son, Michael, was just 12 then, a sweet, quiet child, always clutching his books, always eager to please me. I walked home that day with the bread in my hands, but my mind was heavy. At supper, I watched him, his small hands carefully folding his napkin, his dark eyes avoiding mine as though he carried a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I wanted to ask him, but a mother's heart is a fragile thing. Sometimes, it chooses silence over the possibility of pain. But the whispers followed me everywhere. At church, when the hymns ended, I noticed people staring at us. At the grocery store, I caught a couple looking at Michael, then at me, shaking their heads with pity. My sister, Clara, once tried to bring it up. "Eleanor," she said softly, "there are things about Michael you might need to face." I cut her off. "Don't. He's my son. Whatever people say, I don't want to hear it." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My husband, Richard, was already asleep beside me, his snoring deep and steady, but I couldn't close my eyes. What were these whispers? Why couldn't anyone say them out loud to me? Was I blind? Or was the world cruel enough to invent lies about an innocent boy? The first sign came quietly. Michael had started staying out late after school. "Library," he would say, his voice too casual, "working on a project." But when I asked about the project, his answers were vague. He seemed distant, distracted, as though a part of him had slipped into another world. One evening, I decided to follow him. My heart pounded as I walked a few steps behind, keeping to the shadows. He turned down an alley I rarely noticed, his pace quick and purposeful. And there, under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, he met with two older boys I had never seen before. Their clothes were ragged, their laughter too harsh for children. Michael handed one of them something small, too quick for me to see. The boy pocketed it, clapped Michael on the back, and disappeared. My son stayed there for a moment, staring at the ground, then walked home as though nothing had happened. I followed, silent, shaken. That night at dinner, I searched his face. "How was the library?" I asked. He nodded, chewing slowly. "Fine, Mama." His voice was calm, steady, practiced. Something inside me cracked. I wanted to reach across the table, grab his hand, and demand the truth. But my tongue was heavy. Instead, I smiled weakly, pretending I believed him, pretending for both our sakes. The days turned into weeks, and I noticed more. Michael's clothes sometimes smelled faintly of smoke. Once, his hands were scraped raw, and he muttered something about falling. His eyes, once so bright, seemed older, darker, filled with secrets he refused to share. The whispers grew louder too. At Sunday service, Reverend Harris placed a hand on my shoulder. His eyes carried sympathy, but his words were sharp. A mother can only hide from the truth for so long. "Eleanor." That night, I sat by the window, watching Michael's room. A dim light flickered under his door. I walked quietly, my bare feet silent against the wooden floor. Through the small crack, I saw him sitting at his desk, not reading, not writing, but staring at something in his hands. A small box. He opened it, closed it, opened it again, like a ritual. I couldn't see what was inside, and maybe a part of me didn't want to. But I knew then, the whispers weren't just noise. They were warnings, and I had ignored them for too long. The question that haunted me wasn't what are they saying anymore. It was, what will I find when I finally dare to look closer? That night, as the clock struck midnight, I made myself a promise. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending. Tomorrow, I would watch him with my own eyes. And that decision, though I didn't know it then, was the beginning of the end of the mother I once was. What was in that box Michael kept hidden? And was I ready to learn the truth, even if it destroyed me? The morning after I made that promise, I felt like a different woman. My body was weak with age, but my spirit was sharper than it had been in years. I moved through the house quietly, studying every detail of Michael's behavior. He greeted me with his usual soft good morning, Mama, but I noticed his eyes never lingered on mine. They slid away quickly, as though afraid of being read. That day, I searched his room while he was at school. A mother shouldn't have to spy on her child, but desperation makes you abandon pride. His closet was neat, his desk drawers filled with pencils, notebooks, and the ordinary clutter of a teenage boy. But under his mattress, I found the box, the same one I had seen him holding in secret. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. It was small, made of dark wood, carved with strange markings I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat. When I opened it, I expected drugs, or money, or maybe letters from someone I didn't know. But what I saw chilled me more than I can explain. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all of me. Some were old, pictures I hadn't even known existed, me hanging laundry in the yard, me reading in the porch chair, me asleep on the sofa. In every picture, my eyes had been scratched out with something sharp. I dropped the box, my heart pounding so loud I thought the walls would echo. My son. My sweet Michael. Why would he do this? What kind of darkness would make him erase my eyes from my own face? I shoved the box back, slammed the mattress down, and rushed out of his room, gasping for air. For hours I sat in the kitchen, staring at the clock, waiting for him to come home. My mind fought against itself. He's just a boy. He doesn't mean it. Maybe someone gave him those photos. Maybe it's a prank. But the truth clawed at me. I had seen the way he stared at them. That wasn't a prank. That was obsession. When Michael walked in that evening, his cheeks red from the cold, his backpack slung lazily over one shoulder, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I forced myself to smile. How was school? He shrugged. Fine. We sat down for dinner. Richard tried to start conversation, but I barely heard him. My eyes stayed on Michael. His hands moved carefully, his face calm, but beneath it I could sense the tension, like a storm hiding under clear skies. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I heard movement in his room, quiet footsteps, a creak of the window. My heart pounded as I crept to his door. Slowly, I pushed it open, just enough to see inside. Michael wasn't in bed. He was slipping out the window. I waited a moment, then followed. The air outside was biting cold. The moon, high above. I kept my distance, careful not to let my shadow fall too close. He walked quickly, heading toward the woods behind our house. The deeper he went, the darker it became. My body screamed for me to stop, to turn back. But a mother's fear is stronger than her bones. I pressed on. Finally, I saw him enter a small clearing. There, he wasn't alone. A circle of boys stood around him, older, taller, with faces I didn't recognize. In the center of the circle was a fire, small but burning bright against the night. And in Michael's hands was the box. He opened it, lifted one of the photographs, and held it to the flames. The boys cheered as the picture curled, blackened, and turned to ash. Michael's eyes glowed in the firelight, his lips moving silently as if reciting words. I couldn't hear what he said, but my body shook with terror. It wasn't just a game. It wasn't mischief. It was something darker. Something that had taken root in my son's soul. I turned away before he could see me, running through the woods as quietly as I could. My heart raced, my breath tore through my chest, and by the time I reached home, I collapsed into a chair, trembling. When Michael returned later that night, he climbed back through the window, thinking no one had seen him. He kissed me on the cheek as if nothing was wrong. "Good night, Mama." His voice was gentle, almost tender. But in my mind, all I could see was his face lit by the fire, feeding my photographs to the flames. For the first time, I asked myself a question I never thought possible for a mother. Was my son still my son, or had something taken him away from me? The next morning, I wasn't the only one who knew something about Michael. A neighbor came to my door with a warning that froze my blood. The morning after that dreadful night, I was still trembling. I hadn't slept at all. My mind replayed the fire in the woods, the boys chanting, Michael's eyes glowing with something I couldn't recognize. I poured myself a cup of coffee. though my hands shook so badly half of it spilled on the table. That was when I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, I found Mrs. Whitaker, our neighbor from down the road. A kind woman, usually full of gossip and pies, but that morning her face was pale, her eyes sharp with urgency. She stepped inside without waiting for me to invite her. "Eleanor," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk. About Michael." I felt my stomach drop. "Not you too," I whispered. "Please, not you too." She shook her head. "You think these are just whispers, but I've seen things. At night, in the woods," her voice cracked. "Your boy isn't alone out there. And what they're doing it isn't right. It isn't natural." I wanted to deny it, to shout at her, but the truth was, I had seen it with my own eyes. My lips parted, but no words came. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Keep him close, Eleanor, before it's too late." Then she left, her words echoing in the silence of my kitchen. That day, I couldn't look at Michael the same way. He came down for breakfast, smiling faintly as though nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek, but I felt cold where his lips touched me. "Going to school, Mama," he said. His eyes lingered on me this time, as if daring me to question him. I watched him walk out the door, and every step he took felt like a step away from the boy I had raised. By evening, my resolve hardened. I had to know the truth, not just glimpses through doors and shadows in the woods. I had to confront him when he returned home. I waited until Richard had gone to bed. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. Michael sat at the table, idly flipping through one of his notebooks. I sat across from him, folding my hands to hide their trembling. "Michael," I began softly, "what were you doing last night?" His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Last night, I was here, studying." "Don't lie to me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I saw you, in the woods, with the others, burning those pictures." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Not the innocent smile of my little boy, but something sharper, colder. "So you finally looked," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. My breath caught. "Why, Michael, why are you doing this? Why those pictures of me?" He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You wouldn't understand, Mama. You see me as a child, but I'm not. They showed me things. They taught me." "Taught you, what?" I demanded, though fear choked me. His eyes darkened. "How to see the truth. How to get rid of what blinds me. Your eyes. They see everything, don't they? Always watching, always judging." I needed to take them away. My heart shattered. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling it ache as though it might burst. "Michael, I'm your mother. I gave you life. How could you?" He stood up suddenly, the chair screeching against the floor. "You'll never understand. But soon, you'll see. Everyone will." And with that, he left the table, walking upstairs, leaving me frozen in terror. That night, I sat awake until dawn, tears streaking my face. The boy I had carried in my arms, the boy I had sung to sleep, now looked at me with eyes that no longer belonged to him. But the worst came the following evening. I heard a scream from outside, high-pitched, desperate. I rushed to the window and saw a figure running down the road, Mrs. Whitaker. She stumbled toward my house, her nightgown torn, her face wild with fear. I threw open the door just as she collapsed onto my porch. "Eleanor," she gasped, clutching my arm. "It's them. The boys. Your son." Her voice broke into sobs. "They tried to drag me into the woods. They said it was my turn." I felt my blood run cold. I pulled her inside, locking the door behind us. She wept into my shoulder, trembling like a child. In that moment, I knew. The whispers weren't just rumors. They were warnings, and I had ignored them until the darkness had spread too far. Michael wasn't just playing dangerous games. He was part of something that was consuming him, and now, it was reaching for others. The next night, I followed Michael again, and what I discovered in those woods was darker than anything I could have imagined. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. Every time I looked at Michael, my skin crawled. He sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, as though nothing had happened. As though Mrs. Whitaker hadn't nearly been dragged into the darkness. I knew if I stayed silent any longer, I would lose him forever, or worse. He would drag me into whatever abyss he had already fallen into. So, when the clock struck midnight and Michael slipped out the back door, I followed. The night was still, the air heavy. I moved quietly, my shawl wrapped tight around my shoulders. My feet crunched softly against the earth as I trailed him. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain he could hear it. Michael walked swiftly down the dirt road, past the creek, and into the woods. I stayed a good distance behind, ducking behind trees, praying the moonlight wouldn't give me away. Then I saw it again, the fire. A circle of boys, their faces painted with ash, their hands raised toward the flames. And in the center, bound and gagged, was a figure. At first I thought my eyes deceived me, but then I realized it was Mrs. Whitaker. Her eyes bulged with terror as the boys circled her, chanting in low guttural tones. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop from screaming. And there was Michael, my Michael, standing tall among them, leading the chant. His eyes reflected the firelight, and for a moment, he looked like someone I had never met before. I crept closer, hiding behind a tree, straining to hear the words. They weren't in English. They weren't in any language I recognized. The sound of it made my stomach twist, like something foul crawling under my skin. Then Michael raised his hand, and the chanting stopped. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. He pulled something from his pocket. At first, I thought it was just one of his notebooks. But no, it was a photograph of me. My knees went weak. He held it over the fire, his lips moving as though he were whispering a prayer. Then he looked at Mrs. Whitaker and spoke clearly. She sees too much. Tonight, we offer her silence. Mrs. Whitaker screamed against her gag, thrashing violently. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I burst from the trees, shouting his name. Michael, the boys gasped, turning toward me. Michael's eyes widened, shock flashing across his face. But it wasn't the shock of guilt, it was fury. What are you doing here? He hissed. I stumbled toward the fire, my voice trembling but loud. Stop this madness. She's our neighbor, your teacher when you were little. For God's sake, she baked you cookies every Christmas. Michael's expression hardened. He looked at the boys, then back at me. She doesn't understand. None of them do. She only sees the surface. But we've been chosen. Chosen by who? I cried. Chosen for what? To destroy everything good in your life. To burn your own mother's picture. His jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the photograph. For a moment, I thought he might throw it into the fire, sealing something terrible. But then, he did something worse. He tore it in half. Slowly, deliberately. And as the pieces fell into the flames, a gust of wind blew through the clearing, so strong it almost knocked me over. The fire roared higher, sparks flying like angry stars. The boys cheered, their voices rising in unison. And in that moment, I swear to you, I saw something in the flames. A face, dark, twisted, watching us. I screamed, clutching my cross necklace, praying under my breath. Michael looked at me, then not with the eyes of my son, but with something ancient staring out through them. Go home, Mama, he said, his voice deep, almost unearthly, before it takes you to. But I couldn't leave, not with Mrs. Whitaker bound in that circle, sobbing behind her gag. So I did the only thing I could think of. I ran to her. Chaos erupted. The boys lunged at me, grabbing at my arms, my clothes, but adrenaline gave me strength I didn't know I had. I kicked, shoved, clawed until I reached her. My fingers fumbled with the knots, tears streaming down my face as I whispered, hold on, hold on. And then Michael's hand clamped onto my wrist. Hard. Our eyes met. His were wild, blazing with fury, and something I couldn't name. Why are you fighting me? He growled. Don't you see? This is bigger than us. My voice broke. Because you're my son, and no matter what darkness has touched you, I will not let it have you. For a second, just a flicker, I saw the boy I once knew in his eyes. The little boy who used to bring me wildflowers, who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. But then it vanished, replaced by that cold emptiness. He shoved me backward. I fell hard to the ground. The breath knocked out of me. By the time I scrambled to my knees, the boys had dragged Mrs. Whitaker back into the circle. Michael raised his arms again. Finish it, he commanded. And that's when I realized I couldn't save them both. Not tonight. I had to choose. Save Mrs. Whitaker, or save Michael from himself. As the fire roared higher, I made the most painful decision of my life, one that would haunt me forever. The fire roared, taller than the trees, its heat searing my skin even from where I knelt. The boys' chanting grew louder, their voices no longer sounding like children at all, but like something darker, ancient, echoing through the woods. I looked at Mrs. Whitaker, her eyes pleading, her body shaking as she struggled against the ropes. I looked at Michael, my son, standing so tall, his face twisted by shadows, his arms raised as if he commanded the flames themselves. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't save them both. The choice carved itself into my heart like a blade. If I pulled Mrs. Whitaker from the fire, Michael would sink deeper into whatever darkness had claimed him. But if I reached for Michael, Mrs. Whitaker would surely die. My breath came in ragged sobs. "Dear Lord," I whispered, "forgive me." With trembling legs, I stumbled toward Michael. The boys tried to block me, clawing at my arms, but I fought through them, desperate, wild. I grabbed Michael's shoulders, shaking him hard. "Look at me. Look at your mother." For a second, just 1 second, the chant faltered. His eyes flickered, confusion flashing across his face. "Mama," he whispered, his voice small, fragile, like the boy I once knew. "Come back to me, Michael, please," I begged, tears pouring down my cheeks. "I don't care what they promised you. I don't care what they showed you. You are mine. You are my son. And I will never stop fighting for you." But then, his expression hardened again. He shoved me back, his voice deep and cold. "It's too late. You can't stop this." Behind us, Mrs. Whitaker screamed into her gag, the fire licking dangerously close to her. Something inside me broke. A strength I didn't know I had surged through me. I grabbed a fallen branch from the ground, swung it with every ounce of desperation in my soul, and knocked the circle of fire apart. Sparks flew. Boys shrieked, scattering in panic. Michael roared a sound I swear wasn't human. I lunged for Mrs. Whitaker, cutting the ropes with the jagged edge of the branch. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing, coughing from the smoke. "Run," I shouted at her. "Run and don't look back." She hesitated, terror etched on her face. "What about you?" "I'll handle him," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine, it sounded like something older, fiercer, forged by a mother's love. Mrs. Whitaker staggered into the darkness, her figure swallowed by the trees. And then it was just me and Michael. The fire still burned, though weaker now, its flames sputtering angrily. Michael stood across from me, his chest heaving, his face twisted with rage. "You ruined everything," he spat. "No," I said softly, though my voice trembled. "I saved you, even if you don't see it yet." He stepped closer, his fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he would strike me, but instead, he stopped, staring at me with a look that chilled my blood. "You don't understand, Mama. It isn't me you're fighting. It's what's inside me." And then his body convulsed. His back arched, his mouth opened in a silent scream, and his eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. The fire flared again, as if feeding off his pain. I fell to my knees, praying desperately, clutching my cross so hard it dug into my palm. "Lord, protect my boy. Whatever darkness has touched him, take me instead." The air grew heavy, the flames twisting into shapes' faces, hands reaching. I swear I heard whispers, 1,000 voices murmuring in unison. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Michael collapsed to the ground, his body limp, the fire dying out into smoke and ash. I crawled to him, gathering him into my arms. His chest rose and fell, faint but steady. His face was pale, streaked with tears. "Mama," he whispered weakly. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," I sobbed, rocking him like I did when he was a child. His eyes fluttered open, softer now, human again. I didn't want to hurt you." "I know," I said, kissing his forehead. "You're safe now. It's over." But deep inside, I knew it wasn't. Single quotes T, because as I held him, I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck. A whisper, faint but unmistakable, hissed into my ear. "It's only the beginning." I froze, my arms tightening around Michael. His eyes slipped shut, exhausted, and he drifted into unconsciousness. I carried him home that night, my body aching, my soul shattered. Mrs. Whitaker never spoke of what happened in the woods. The other boys vanished, their families moving away within weeks, as though chased by something none of them dared to name. And Michael, he never spoke of it again. He returned to school, returned to chores, returned to the boy the world believed him to be. But I know better. Sometimes, I catch him staring into the fire when we light the hearth in winter, his eyes reflecting the flames. And sometimes, when the night is still, I hear him whispering in that same strange language, his lips barely moving. I pray every day that the darkness left him that night, but in my heart, I know the truth. It never really left. So, if you ever hear whispers about your child, don't ignore them like I did, because sometimes, the whispers are warnings, and sometimes, they are already too late.